Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Saturday, December 12th, 2020, 10 a.m. Central, in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Well, I say beautiful, but it's awfully frozen over right now. We got a pretty decent snow storm yesterday. Blinding, sloppy, slick, difficult driving around, that's for sure. The trucks are out scraping it off today, but it's mostly slush at this point because it warmed up a bit. And now everything is, it seems like it's a lot tougher to plow slush than it is to plow snow. It just wants to pour off of various sides of the plow. Anyway, it is Saturday, and that means it's GM Review Day, and we're taking a look at a board game. We've got the rule book, which you can download off their website if you want to. I should put a link in the show notes to that. But there you go. I want to talk about it in terms of what you can get from it, and this is what GM's Review Day is about. What you can get from it in regard to RPGing. Not necessarily D&D, but, there are elements, right, that transfer from one RPG to another. So in that regard, you can count on it. The thing to look at with this, and it came up in a discussion the other day when I was talking to somebody about the difference between ways to look at, rather, not the difference between, but ways to look at that spectrum that goes from sandbox to linear play. A lot of people say railroad. I heard someone say it. I just said it. That's who I heard say it. Regardless, the point is, linear play doesn't leave for a lot of options for the players. Sandbox play leaves supposedly an infinite number of options for the player. But neither is completely true. So on that spectrum, from one to the other, it's basically a player agency spectrum, right? How much agency do the players have? Every game's going to come away from being a sandbox or away from being strictly linear, just by virtue of putting players in there and them even deciding on the name of their character or a vocalization for their character. That's a player choice. It moves it away from being completely linear, completely of the DM's making. A completely linear is just a DM sitting there reading a story to you, and you're not even nodding, because once you nod, you've included yourself into the process. So even nodding while someone tells you a story takes it away from being completely linear, because by granting consent, you're joining into the reality that is that story, right? So it takes you away from that. Sandbox-wise, once you put it in a setting, Firefly, for example, once you put it into that world, you've eliminated some choices. Your characters in the Firefly setting are not going to be able to say, let's go confront the Borg. It's a different universe. It's not going to happen. If you add that in, what about going and fighting Darth Vader? Wait, that's a different sci-fi setting. Are we adding that in? If you don't, everything you don't have, everything you exclude, chops down that infinite number of choices and pushes you away, pulls you away, either way, moves you away from an ideal, true, absolute sandbox. So everything on that spectrum keeps moving closer to the center. So at some point, we're somewhere together. player choices, lack of potential choices brings you somewhere on that spectrum. Anyway, I brought up the idea of Firefly because Firefly as a game has a number of ways of playing it. You can play it with a randomized mission or victory condition. And it might be go collect this number of things and bring them to this one place, or go get a certain amount of this or that. And once you've gathered it, there you go. So there are different ways of playing it. What we've done, a group of friends of mine and I, when we've played it, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 different times in this way, is to forego the deck of cards of missions that you can perform, and we just play. It's a wealth game because we play on a time limit. We usually play at the game store, and if the game store was closing at 10, we might say, okay, we're going to play till 9:45, and then we're going to count up who has the most, and that person will have won. You can go anywhere you want within this 30-plus world universe and upgrade your ship, change out your crew. Everybody gets a captain at the beginning of the game and a base ship that you choose, and then you go from there. So everybody starts basically on an equal footing, maybe some slight variations, and then you jump into the world and you go do what you want to do. So it's very much like an RPG, and that's what I was trying to illustrate by using it in that conversation. You can play with the preset missions and have fewer choices, or you can just say, sky's the limit, go where you want. Sky, can't take it from me. Go where you want, collect as much of this as possible, and you know what? Quite honestly, you don't even have to participate in the game as somebody who's competing for that, who has the most total at the end. You could just go around and just find interesting things to do and just enjoy the evening that way. Who cares who wins? Have you never been to this planet? This other society over here? You've seen the show, you've watched the movie, and there is a 14-episode, one season Firefly TV series that then was a few years later capped off with a single movie. And if you haven't seen them, you really should. It's definitely binge worthy. Well, let's look at the rule book a little bit, and we can talk about it. Hey, Rick, how you doing, buddy? Talking about Firefly, the board game, as it what lessons we as game masters of RPGs can learn from it. So here we go. All right. So you've got all these NPCs, and all of them have, most of these are this contact deck. These are mostly individuals that are people that you could pick up contracts from, missions from, and they also have individual price guidelines. So if you collect certain items, you can sell them. They also are places where you can buy certain items. They essentially act as arbiters of individual markets, and they're all just a little bit different from each other. They all have their own foibles. There's pluses and minuses to visiting any individual one. The supply deck. 5 supply decks contain the crew, gear, and ship upgrades you need to successfully make your way through the universe, as they call it in Firefly speak, is the verse. Each supply deck corresponds to a specific location on the game board. So these different markets, or these different NPCs who are arbiters of these markets, each are located at various places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some of them related to this. I believe Harkin is actually on a ship. An alliance ship, which is like, if you're used to Star Trek, it's kind of like a Federation, or if you're used to Star Wars, it's like an Empire, and they're the law and order of the verse. All right. Well, let's look there. Nav decks. So you're drawing cards as you move around the board, as you navigate your ship, depending on what kind of upgrades it has. Can move a certain speed, a certain number of spaces on the board. You've got all these different crew cards, whether you're picking up Wash as a pilot or someone else who's a good pilot. Gear, you've got guns, you've got mules, which are transport devices for moving supplies off ship. Various other things like that. Ship upgrades. You can make your engines better. You can add additional hidey holes within your space smuggling ship. Deliveries. These are things that you can pick up and take somewhere and earn money. Sometimes it's legal deliveries. Sometimes they're contraband. There's a possibility. There are crimes you can perform. Go this place and steal this stuff. And if you pull off this mission, you can gain money. It's assumed that you are operating under the law at the beginning of the game of the Alliance Federation, whatever you want to call it, under their control, under their law for all of these planets. The further away you get from the center of Alliance territory, the less lawful the NPCs that will be on those different places will be. But it's also true that at the beginning of the game, you're considered brown coats all the way, right on. Hey, John. Hey, how you doing, buddy? And it's assumed you're under the law to start with. You can perform some of these crimes, and it's possible that you can get away with them and not be outlawed at that point. But there are certain things that you do and have to randomize, roll for. It may be that you become an outlaw. And if you do, you can have one of these down here on the right, the blue warrant issue card, or chit. You can have those against you, in which case all bets are off. So you've got these different contraband and cargo counters. Your ship has a certain number of spaces. Upper left here, there's the Serenity. You have a number of slots at the bottom of that card for upgrades to that ship. On that ship card, you have a number of spots where you can put cargo and a quote-unquote stash where you can hide contraband, or just carry regular cargo. If it's not illegal, it's still storage space. And you can increase the size of your cargo holds by adding on different enhancements, increase your weapons, you can increase your speed. So there are various things you can do. You still have to watch out for the Reavers, which are notorious bad guys. Think of them like space orcs, if you will. They're out there just causing chaos and killing off people whenever they get a chance. There are also Alliance ships that are floating around, and as long as you're on the right side of the law, you really don't have to worry about them too much. In fact, they're a place you can pick up fuel, which you do need to carry. And you've got food, or rather, well, let me see. Let me move on here. The nav deck, these are things that can happen as you're flying around. And if you're in border space, which is outside Alliance protected space, there's some nastier things that can happen, including those Reavers that we just talked about. There's a misbehave deck. So anytime you take a mission, you have a number of choices. You can roll dice based on the crew that you have How many guns do you have? How much technical ability do you have? There are different ways of overcoming problems. You might need a technician to be able to roll to break a lock on a safe so that you can get the goods out from inside of it. You might need a pilot who can do fancy maneuvers to get you in and out of trouble. You may just need to bring your 6-shooters out and fight against individuals or fight hand to hand. So there are any number of things you can do when you do perform a mission, but there's also the possibility of outsmarting it by drawing a certain number of cards from the misbehave deck, and that tells you misbehave when you're working illegal jobs. You never know exactly what you're going to find when you land planet side. So those are opportunities to either cleverly sidestep certain troubles or to gain additional rewards just by being clever. Winning the game. As I said, there were a number of cards, different ways you could choose to win. Personally, my favorite has always been the one that is just simple in that we decide who wins based on who has the most money, and there's different beautiful colored money. You get your own board. Here's the game board with all the alignment or alliance planets in the center, and those that are under the influence of the alliance and further out. As I say, the further out you go, the more dangerous, the more lawless it is, the more dangerous it can be. But the rewards can be higher. So there you go. Beautiful board. I think there's like 30 some odd planets on it. There was an expansion that included off to the side a few extra planets that they added in later on. That's not included in the base game, but as you can see, the base game is chock full of plenty. So, get your nav decks out for navigation for whenever you move. You draw those to see if any events happen. Sometimes that can be a part in your ship breaking down and you're stuck and you got to make repairs so you can't move anymore. Sometimes it can be a bonus that it's smooth sailing and you can just fly on. Sometimes it's an encounter with an alliance ship and you either can try to avoid them or power down and just let them fly on by while they maybe not noticing you. Or you can greet them and stop and maybe buy fuel off of them, which can be useful, right? So sometimes that can be helpful. There are... in this game, you can't just dead calm, which if you're familiar with the show, they did a whole episode on running out of fuel way out in dark space. But in this game, how much fun would that be in a game? Run out of fuel out somewhere where you can't get any more and just slowly die. That's not fun in a game. So you can always move one space. Even if you're out there and for some reason you run out of fuel, pirates raid you. Oh, and here's the other thing about this game too. You can play it so it's interactive amongst the players. If there's a warrant on another player and you can capture them and turn them over to the Alliance, then you can get a reward for it. Also, you don't get knocked out of this game. If you are, for instance, captured and turned over to the Alliance, at some point they let you go and you start off with a base ship because they'll strip all your stuff away. So you're taking some risks going outside of the law. Place the cruiser and the reaver cutter. Those ships stay out on the board and they can move. For instance, when you pull from the nav deck a card that says move the reavers a space, and it's always like, I forget if it's a person on the left or person on the right of the current player gets to move that ship. So there's always the possibility that somebody who's another player can make your life a little harder by moving these troublesome NPCs closer to you or putting them in your way. If they know you've got a mission that's going to take you to a certain planet because you blabbed, then they can put something in between you and that goal. So it could be trouble. Choosing a ship and a leader, so you pick a ship, you pick a captain, as I said. Goal of the game, I've gone over that. Starting supplies, you get a certain number of credits, that's the money, certain number of fuel. Oh, and parts. So you can have some spare parts that you can use to repair your ship if it goes down. Or you could buy and sell parts. If you can find markets where parts are fetch a higher dollar or a higher number of credits than the place you picked them up, then there you go. Maybe you find a derelict ship just floating in space and you can strip it for parts. Now, while that might not be strictly legal in the eyes of the law, if you're outside of Alliance space and have little chance of running into a ship, an Alliance ship, then maybe you pick it clean. Starting jobs, so next step would be picking up various missions. And they call them jobs. I should just call them jobs. From the various contacts, those different NPCs that are at those market locations. Priming the pump. After choosing starting jobs, flip over the top 3 cards of the supply deck. So there's always a supply deck for each of the various locations. So you might know that there's currently a good pilot on offer at a particular place. And you need a better pilot. You're not happy with the one you have. So that's going to be one of your self-starting missions, is just to get to that location to pick up a better pilot. Skill tests, as we talked about, some of them can be about guns, can be about tech, or negotiate. Yes, diplomatic. So, essentially this is these are all the same sorts of things you would have in RPGs, right? You can combat, you can work through something, so it's more of a skill check, and negotiate, you can RP your way through something. Now, granted, different characters each have different crew members, each have their own abilities where they'll be stronger in one than another. Might have somebody who's really good at tech, but not so good at fighting at all, but sometimes a decent negotiator. So they're going to be different levels for each one. And you might fill your crew mostly with fighters and just go off and do pirating. Just every ship you run into. Here's one. Here's Kaylee. She's got 3 tech skill points. So she's all in on the tech side of things. The crew cards. You got these gear cards. They add to different skills. This particular weapon, this particular gun will, Vera, if you know the show, will give you 2 combat gun points, if you will. And but we'll add 1 to negotiations too, because just having it around, people will often listen to you more. So you want to build yourself up in those various things. Deal actions, so then you can go to these different contact points and make deals, finishing certain types of deal, contraband deals, supply or cargo deals. They'll pay more for contraband. Patience will than she will for regular cargo. So she's a good mover and shaker of that sort of thing. Cargo fetches a pretty penny with Badger. Maybe a little bit more. Fuel, Harkin's all about fuel. They all have their own pluses and minuses. Jobs, they'll have a job names, number of times you'll have to draw from the misbehaving deck. Those are different things you have to do to get through the job, whether it's pick a lock, move some items, face down some NPCs. It'll tell you whether it's legal or illegal. Sometimes they're immoral, even if they're legal. Sometimes they're not immoral if they are illegal. So it tells you what skills you'll need to be able to take on the job in the first place. It'll tell you where to pick stuff up and where to drop stuff off if it's a job that's moving stuff. tell you what how much it pays, and if there's a bonus for doing it a certain way. Because sometimes some jobs have a green bonus tab. Listed in the tab will be a profession and a credit amount. If a member of the crew who completes the job has that profession, the credit's listed in the bonus tab. So sometimes certain jobs are geared towards certain individuals. And if you're a certain type of individual, you can make a bonus because they like the fact that you're involved in that. They've drawn you in. There we go. All right. Well, this gets into the weeds a little bit. We're a little more detailed there, but enough to say that you can go to the website past the dinosaur. The dinosaur denotes who's the current player. If you're familiar with the show, you'll get a little chuckle out of that. John Kowaleski was the designer of the game. It is a Gale Force 9 game. You can probably search by Firefly, Gale Force 9 rules. Pick this up for yourself if you want to check it out. But in essence, it's very much like a starter RPG. Every character, every crew member has a certain number of skills in various areas, whether they're talkers or fighters or techies, and they can be a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And when you build your crew, your adventuring party, so to speak, you're trying to maintain a nice balance or maybe shift in one direction or another based on what your goals are going to be during the course of the game. And so there's all sorts of options. And if you play this in an open-ended way, in a more sandboxy type way, like we do when we do it just on a time limit, we know we have a certain number of hours we can play it. We're going to stop about 15 minutes or a half hour before that end time, tally things up, and figure out who won. And there's a lot. There are the 30 plus planets. There's all these decks for all these different markets and places. There's the nav deck. So every time you're moving, you're drawing, and things can happen. So there's constantly a randomization to what can be happening at any given time in any given place. And you have to navigate all of that and accomplish goals, either ones you choose, pick up jobs that you decide, and when you go to a certain job market and talk to one of those individuals who's there, they'll have several jobs on offer, and you can pick and choose from those, or you can draw blindly. You can hang on to a certain number of jobs, keep them in your back pocket, and until you start the job, you're not committed to it. So certain jobs will be on offer. It doesn't mean that just anything will be. And of course, you can always just go on your own and go out and be a pirate, find other ships, look for derelicts, strip them, buy and sell parts. There are so many different ways that you can buy stuff that's cheap at one market and sell it at another market where it fetches a higher value. You can just be a merchant if you wanted to. All different ways you can approach this game. And that's true for any RPG, right? Well, I'll tell you what, I see the clock on the walls telling us we're almost out of time. So I will say, as I always do, GM Reviews is about things I like and enjoy, that I'm trying to draw some parallels for RPGs. There is a Firefly RPG that you can pick up and play. This would probably make a good starter game for that particular RPG. It's a fun game anyway. If you like Firefly and you like Serenity the movie, this is just a fun board game to play. And it has, as I say, so many aspects, player mechanics that would easily transfer over to RPGs. You could use it if you got somebody who hasn't played RPGs and they're familiar with Firefly and Serenity, and you want to edge them towards someday trying to play an RPG, bust out this board game. They'll enjoy it just from the perspective of knowing the show and knowing the source material. And then once they've played this and they realize, hey, these RPGs, that you're trying to get me into could be fun too. And I've got so many more choices. It's just more granulated, right? Once we have a bunch of ability scores and there's so much more equipment to be had, and the world is so different, and now we're being even more immersed in the characters. So use it as a starter thing. Anyway, I just want to say thank you very much to everybody who came out today. Always fun to do the show on a weekend, and I appreciate everybody who's following the channel, and especially if you chime in on the stream chat while you're here. It's very kind of you to do so. Let me make sure all of you are in. Oh, yeah, that's right. First time John's been out this week, so I can add him to the list too. Excellent. Well, I've got my list for next week. Not sure what I'm doing, what I'm giving away with it, but we'll get there. We'll get her done. Right on. Hey, we've got one more week, really, one more full week of shows on this schedule. So don't forget tomorrow, Rules Retrospective, Monday, weekly news and announcements, our cartography and world building on Tuesday, campaign discussion on Wednesday, GMing tips on Thursday, building adventures on Friday, then back around the horn to GM reviews on Saturday. If you're catching up with this on YouTube, thank you very much. Please do subscribe to the channel and make sure to give a thumbs up to any videos you are watching and enjoying. Indeed, Rick, it is a gateway. Hey, this has been the OK Grognard Show from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Bye-bye.